Most video game channels like to top off the end of the year with a top 10 best or top 10 worst video game list from what they've played on our current trip around the sun. Sometimes I've thought about doing that too, but quite often I realize that a lot of these lists tend to look the same, so it doesn't really seem like a fun idea to me. I also realized that this year I didn't really play a ton of new releases, which is not to say I didn't want to. I mean, some games I was really looking forward to but didn't play was the Resident Evil 2 remake, Astral Chain, that new Star Wars, Outer Worlds, Bloodstained, and several others. Though there were a few I did get to, like Devil May Cry 5, Fire Emblem Three Houses, Shadowbringers, and Code Vein, so it wasn't a total wash. But when I sit here trying to figure out why I didn't go out and play all the new games that I wanted to, I realize that most of it is just due to a lack of time. But I've also come to realize that I've been trying not to load too many games onto my library when there's so many I already own but haven't touched. Personally, I blame the dreaded Steam sales, where games that I'm sort of interested in become dirt cheap for a couple of hours, so I pick them up, and then I lock them away, never to look at them ever again. It's like a Venus flytrap for fools that somehow think they have time management skills. So for my last video for this year, I decided to do something different and fun. I'm going to go through every single game I own on Steam that I have not played and play it for 1 hour. Then, I'm going to write a micro review on the game based on my first impressions of it. If I decide that it has enough of my interest to keep playing, I'll continue it on the stream next year starting in January. If it doesn't, I'm never touching it again. Couple of rules to establish for this. 1, it has to be a game that I have not played at all. There's a few games in my library that I've touched but didn't go back to, so those are out. 2, the hour officially starts once I'm given control, so JRPGs with long cutscenes can't just be an hour of those cutscenes. I have to actually play the game at some point. Now then, how many games are we going to be looking at this video? Well, that's actually not as bad as I thought. But regardless, this is probably going to be a long one, so go ahead and settle in. Walk the dog, go to the bathroom, pet the cat. Oh god, I didn't pet the cat. God, I didn't pet the cat. Oh jeez, oh fuck! So just going alphabetically, the first game on this list ended up being Agarest, Generation of War. Although this wouldn't be the case if we weren't playing the PC version, because apparently the original Western release was called Record of Agarest War, not to be confused with Record of Grandcrest War, or Record of Lodos War. Is there a reason that there's several Japanese fancy properties named this way? Is this just the naming convention for this kind of game? I'm genuinely curious. Japan, if you're watching, please leave a comment. Agarest is essentially a visual novel dating sim/strategy RPG game. The game's story takes place in a stereotypical fantasy world where a human kingdom is at war with an elven kingdom for some reason. I'll be honest, I wasn't paying much attention to the opening wall of text explaining the backstory. It kind of lost my attention fairly quick. Anyway, you play as a heroic human character, Leonhardt, who becomes a traitor to his people after he defies orders and saves a cute young elf girl from being killed. Leonhardt gets killed in the process of saving her, but is revived by the goddess Dishana, who gives him a chance to save the girl for realsies this time, as long as he does her bidding moving forward. And so he does, becoming the goddess's champion and setting out on a journey to save his world. Also, holy crap, lady, that is some strong tape you must have. To be honest, Agarest feels like a game that is hard to properly glean the quality of in an hour, and looking at some of the other RPGs that are on this list, I realize that this is going to be a recurring problem in some areas. But regardless, I will say that I'm interested in playing this one some more. The combat is pretty basic, but it seems to have the potential to be fun. It also sort of reminds me of Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, a game I love. But this may be because I don't have much experience with isometric strategy games, so most of them are going to blend together. Also, I did a quick look of a summary of this game, and it looks like the main gimmick is that it takes place over literal generations, hence the name. You don't play as Leonhardt the whole game. In fact, you go through about 3 or 4 of his descendants over the course of the story. That sounds insane, and I want to see how it's handled. Plus, I'll say so without shame, I actually kind of like dating sims. So, there. Bayonetta is a game that doesn't really need an introduction. You're a badass who just kicks, shoots, and dances her way through the forces of heaven and hell, or maybe just heaven, we didn't get far enough to confirm the other one, all while a catchy soundtrack plays and characters perform acrobatics more over the top than a Cirque du Soleil show. Honestly, I'm a tad upset that I've slept on this game for so long. I've been hearing people sing its praises for years, but never bit the bullet on sitting down and playing it for some reason. I was a fool! A poor, misguided, and Bayonetta-less fool, I say! If you want to talk about the best possible way to grab someone's attention when they're only playing the game for its first hour, you're gonna want to talk about Bayonetta. Other games will give you the boring, wall-of-text monologue setting up the backstory of the world, but Bayonetta's opening delivers that same monologue as you fight the legions of heaven back-to-back with another witch on top of a broken clock tower falling through the sky, and holy crap, this should be how the delivery of exposition is handled from now on. I'm putting this law into action right now. The spectrum of good opening exposition is Bayonetta being the gold standard, and The Last Promise being the stinky doo-doo range. Anyway, this game is awesome. I'm absolutely playing it again. Bioshock was one of those games that some of my friends would never shut up about back in the day. It was always, dude, Bioshock is amazing. You love good stories? You'll love Bioshock. You like having paternal nightmares about being chased by a metallic drill monster called Daddy? You'll love Bioshock. Eventually, I sat down and played it, and agreed that Bioshock was quite good, though maybe not for all the specific reasons listed above. I skipped Bioshock 2 and went straight to Infinite back in the day, but now going back to Bioshock 2, I am starting to realize how much I appreciated and missed Rapture as a setting. Bioshock does many things well, but I'd say that its defining trait is its atmosphere. The isolated, dark, and ruined setting of Rapture, set under the crushing depths of the ocean, drugged up psychos wandering the halls trying to gut you for their next fix, all while you can hear them down the hall and getting ready to fight. The Big Daddy fights themselves where actual preparation and planning come into play in order for you to get your own fix that you so desire. Learning about the setting through apocalyptic logs and ominous writings on the wall. Granted, it's not backstory monologuing via falling clock tower while fighting angels, but it's trademark horror at its finest, and that does put it on a good spot on the exposition spectrum. I will say that I always found the actual gunplay of Bioshock to be a little weak and loose. It was always the aspect that kind of bothered me the most, and was the one individual thing I think Infinite improved on. And you might disagree, but I think an important aspect of a first-person shooter is the actual shooter mechanics. Also, it's a little odd in this game that you play as a Big Daddy, but nobody treats you with the fear and respect that the damn things had in the original game. It was a little jarring and deflated the intended power fantasy just a little bit. Regardless, I had fun with my hour, so I am going to keep playing this one. Dead Rising is a game that I've had an on and off relationship with over the years. I played the original back on the Xbox 360 and hated it, but then I played the sequel and I thought it was pretty fun. And then I played the updated remake of the second one called Off the Record, and I thought it was fun too, until Steam glitched out and prevented me from getting the Proto Man outfit after putting hours of time into it, so I hated it again. All things considered, it's hard to really go wrong with the concept of Dead Rising. It's a sandbox where you fight zombies in lots of fun and interesting ways. What's not to love, really? Dead Rising 3 follows the same formula of the other games, where you are stuck in an area full of Zambos and you gotta find a way to accomplish your goals, defeat the true villains behind the outbreak, and escape the place before it gets bombed to hell in about 3 days. I will say that right off the bat, Dead Rising 3 struck me as a little weird with its tone when compared to the other games. It felt a little overly serious and trying to invoke a little bit more of the horror element that you'd expect from a zombie story. This is especially noticeable with the player character this time around, Nick, who in my hour spent a good deal of time scared out of his mind like a normal person would be in this scenario. He wasn't a badass Papa Wolf like Chuck Green protecting his daughter, or a sarcastic journalist like Frank who has, well...
I've covered wars, you know.
So that kind of deflates the power fantasy a bit with the lack of the usual quirkiness and black comedy from the other games, but then you are able to do some silly things like fight an insane monk and make an armored car from a cement roller and put on a Hawaiian shirt, so that was pretty cool and more on brand. It just kind of clashed with what the game was doing in its story, I guess. I don't know, I'm not sure what I'm trying to say here. I didn't get terribly far, but I am interested to see how this game ramps up. So yeah, I think I'll revisit this one too. Fallout is one of those classic games that most people know about, but probably didn't actually start playing until it came to consoles in the form of Fallout 3. I was definitely one of those people. The game's an isometric turn-based strategy RPG. Old school, zoomed out perspective, old, weird, uncanny graphics, and lots of text to read with janky animations. Oh yeah, punch those rats! The story is that your family has been holed up in one of the vaults that survived the nuclear apocalypse, but now the vault's water system is failing and you have to go out and find a part to fix it. Everyone is relying on you, Vault Dweller. Go, become the hero you were meant to be. Craft your legend. Yeah, I don't think that this game is for me. I'm sure I've said it before, but I never had much interest or experience with the Final Fantasy series growing up, mostly due to a lack of the proper consoles to play it on. As such, I also missed out on all of the Final Fantasy fan discourse that came with the XIII series. However, I always did find it odd how this game got fairly good official reviews from critics when it came out, but every fan I talked to of the overall series hated it. I mean, like, hated it to the point where they went into a frothing rage anytime the name came up. There was one time I asked a guy of what he thought of the game, and he immediately started yelling at me and told me to eat a dick. It was something. Anyway, just from the first hour of playing, I can sort of see where some of the criticism comes from. On the one hand, this game looks absolutely beautiful, even 10 years after it came out. It's almost too beautiful, as some of the visuals were giving me a bit of a headache watching lightning jump around. On the other hand, my first hour pretty much just consisted of running down what amounted to a well-lit hallway of a map, while occasionally getting into battles where my best option was just to hit the auto battle option and let the game take care of the rest for me, while occasionally selecting a potion to heal the party with. So yeah, I'll admit, I'm not terribly impressed by 13 just yet, but as someone who has played several games that started very slow and that I ended up liking quite a bit in the end, I think I'd be willing to give it a bit more time to see where it goes and if it gets better. So I'll revisit it, if not out of morbid curiosity and just so I can have context as to why people hate this game so much. Also, as a quick side note, I actually do own the other two games in the trilogy for this series, but no, I'm not going to be playing an hour of them for this video because that seems like a really silly idea to play the hour of the sequels without finishing the first. I already have no idea what's going on in 13. I don't need to add the idea of time travel or whatever other thing is introduced into the next two to my plate just yet. If there's one genre of games I enjoy that flow from the tide of indie developers, it's that of the Metroidvania. So it should be of no surprise that I enjoyed the heck out of my first hour of Hollow Knight. I've heard this game been compared to Dark Souls before, but then again that analogy gets tossed around to anything that has a minimalist story or is somewhat difficult. Hollow Knight definitely has the former though. I can see how the latter might crop up later in the game just from the gist that I got off the mechanics alone. The few bosses that I encountered had patterns to deal with telegraph attacks that rewarded your patience and memorization. And then there's the gloomy atmosphere with curious and memorable NPCs scattered around that tell you a little bit more about the world you're in while not just dumping it on you all at once. And they're also freaking adorable, oh my god! One of my friends loves this game, and I've heard them sing praises about it, and I can see why. I'm definitely going to play this one some more because I'm very interested, and I think this game has a lot of promise to it. Prey is a first-person psychological thriller/survival horror/shooter from 2017 developed by Arcane Studios and published by Bethesda. But not to be confused with Prey, another first-person shooter from 2006 developed by Human Head Studios and published by 2K Games. Figure that one out. Prey is a game that, as far as I can tell, takes a whole lot of beats from the Half-Life series. You play a silent protagonist scientist who has to work their way through the remains of a disaster as a hostile alien race is looking to wipe you off the map. You do all this while donning a special suit and smacking them with a mundane but sturdy tool and some other creative weapons. I didn't get very far into this game during my hour, to be honest. I spent a lot of time reading apocalyptic logs off computers and trying to figure out where I was supposed to be going next. Prey seems to pride itself on being the type of game where there are multiple ways to overcome an obstacle, which doesn't surprise me considering the other games that Arcane Studios have made. I do want to play this game more, but I can already tell that I'm going to be needing to get the hang of it because I died a lot in one particular area during my hour, because I honestly don't think I was actually supposed to go in there yet. I just sort of found my way in, but I brute forced my way through anyway. So hopefully I can figure that out better when I revisit it. And also hopefully if I decide to stream it, I can figure out why the heck this game really hates my encoder. I had to trash my first 15 minutes of recorded gameplay for this because the stupid thing just did not want to work. Didn't have this problem with any other game, so I don't know what's going on there. Take a platformer from the original Xbox era, add some Inception, and throw in as many puns as you possibly can, and you get Psychonauts. Can't count the number of times I've seen this game show up on an underrated games list. I would say it was enough for me to go, yeah, I'll buy this if it ever goes on sale for literally $2, which it did, and that's how we're here. The game stars a psychic kid named Rasputin, or Raz for short, who sneaks into a psychic summer camp so that he can learn more about how to use his powers. Once there, he'll go through several different psychic landscapes to hone his skills. And I'm sure there's a villain of the plot, but I don't know who they are yet. I haven't played too many games from Tim Schafer and Double Fine, but I do know that they've always had a charming way of writing their stories and their characters. Psychonauts is no different. The main character, Raz, has got a lot of spunk and a determined personality that makes him an engaging protagonist, and the setting of the game being at a summer camp made for training psychic children into psychic soldiers is something that feels like it should be in a Cartoon Network show or something, which is helped by how all the characters have really outrageous designs that give them a lot of personality. There's a lot of potential here for creativity to run loose, so I'm definitely interested in playing some more. I had a pretty good time in my first hour, and I think that there's a lot of stuff I still haven't tapped into. Resident Evil Revelations was a game that was originally released on the Nintendo 3DS and then later got ported to consoles and PC. Despite really liking the Resident Evil series and owning a 3DS, I didn't actually try to get my hands on it until years after it released. And also, if I recall correctly, that was kind of the brief period where Resident Evil games were kind of getting really bad. It's easy to see a 3DS's influence on this port of the game, though. There are puzzles where you have to move things on screen as if they were part of a touchscreen, or constantly going into a first-person view with a scanner item to click on things to scan them and get more items to assist you. Of course, I didn't play the 3DS version, as I already said, so maybe these things weren't there and I'm talking out of my ass. Anyway, Revelations revolves around Chris and Jill, the two OG protagonists of the series, investigating yet another bioterror attack as a terror group called Veltro has resurfaced and is causing havoc. But so far, the game has just been the two of them fighting clues about the other being missing and then trying to save them. And I'm okay with that. I ship this hard.
Jill, was it?
Was what? Stay focused.
She was your partner before, right?
Yeah, my partner from before. What about it?
I was, just asking.
Resident Evil overall has just been a fun series for me. It's got cool monsters, fun characters, neat environments, and terrible dialogue that just makes you smile. Definitely gonna play this once more because I did enjoy it.
Me and my sweet ass are on the way!
Man, I don't know if it's because I've just been playing a lot of JRPGs this last couple of years, or just because I've played a lot of JRPGs in general in my life, But I'm really starting to get to the point where some of these games are just kind of starting to blend together, much like this next one. Anyway, Shining Resonance Refrain is a pretty cookie-cutter JRPG experience from the hour that I played it. You've got an evil empire and a war with the good kingdom, a fairly whiny male protagonist surrounded by beautiful women with lots of talent on their side, and only you can stop the evil empire and save the world, or whatever the plot's about. It's probably going to be about killing God later, if I had to bet. Something I will admit that I found odd about the prologue of Shining Resonance Refrain is the way it opened up made me felt like I was missing something, like the game just decided to skip the whole first act. A lot of JRPGs of this caliber usually start relatively small with your JRPG protagonist just being a seemingly normal small-town farm boy who has to kill rabbits to feed his little sister, but then the Empire rolls in, burns the town, and then you find out some incredible secret about the main character. Oh no, he's actually the world's messiah, and then you have the aforementioned fight with God. Well, in this game, they cut out that entire first part with the hometown and the little sister and just immediately throw you into the reveal. Your main character is carrying the consciousness of some sort of god dragon called the Shining Dragon, and that's why everybody wants a piece of you. You even turn into the thing and fly out of the first dungeon. It's just kind of odd because it feels like we skipped over some important bits, I guess. And then again, Final Fantasy XIII Agarest sort of did this too, so maybe this game isn't quite as cookie cutter as I thought, at least when it comes to the games on this list. But otherwise, it does feel like it's hitting all of the same beats. Regardless, I didn't dislike my time with this game. The combat is real time, which is nice because I don't really like turn-based in most cases. It actually felt a lot like the Tales series of games in that regard, and those are games that I really love. So despite being fairly cookie cutter in some of its narrative elements, the game was at least fun to play. Also, apparently this version that I played is an updated re-release of the original game, complete with a new story path, so that's an interesting addition. I'll play through the original story first, and if I decide that I like the game overall, then maybe I'll play through the updated story as well. I know I harped on this game a lot in this particular segment about being kind of generic, but I guess I should throw in that being generic doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It can still be fun and enjoyable, it can still have fine writing. It just means that it's writing we've seen before. The visual novel genre is one of those things that is apparently wildly popular in Japan, but still hasn't quite enjoyed any mainstream popularity in the Western market. Sure, there are a couple of games that have gotten some decent attention, like the Ace Attorney series, Danganronpa, or even the Zero Escape series, but all of those have the benefit of being able to easily disguise as point-and-click adventure. No, the games I'm talking about when it comes to visual novels are the 100-hour wall of text games that have you go through the cycle of having the main character internally monologuing on a subject for 5 pages, say 2 or 3 things out loud in response to another character, and then doing it all again. Then occasionally you'll be given the option to actually make a dialogue choice, and that choice could result in the story continuing or you unexpectedly getting a bad ending where you die or something similar happens. They're narrative-heavy games, and Steins Gate is no different. In my hour of playing it, I really didn't get too far into the narrative to get the bigger picture of what it's about, and I am a pretty fast reader. The best I can say at this moment is that it's a game about time travel, a story where our weirdo main character witnesses the death of a girl he barely knew, and then somehow ends up traveling to another timeline where she wasn't murdered and now needs to make sense of it. It doesn't sound like a bad concept so far, but the sheer volume of it does mean that it's going to be a time sink and require some serious reading comprehension, especially the extended sequence where one of the characters gives a lecture on quantum mechanics. I don't think this will be the last time something like this is going to happen in this game either. This isn't to say that I'm not interested in Steins Gate. In fact, I don't think I've scratched the surface of its story yet, so I can't really even form an opinion on what I think about it. But I don't think the format of a visual novel makes a good streaming game or even a Let's Play, which is partially what this list is trying to determine, so I won't be playing it on the channel in the future. Tales from the Borderlands was a game by Telltale Games made around the height of their popularity. I think it was around the time where they had knocked it out of the park with 2 other games, and it felt like every somewhat popular IP was gonna have a Telltale adaptation for some reason. Or at least up until the point where they spread themselves too thin, went bankrupt, and revealed that they had been mistreating their workers and weren't going to be paying them for their severance. Anyway, I remember being skeptical of Tales from the Borderlands because even though I greatly enjoyed Telltale's The Walking Dead, and Borderlands for that matter, it didn't quite feel the same to take a game that was a looter shooter and then turn it into a point-and-click adventure. And I was still a tad skeptical during the opening of my hour with this game, mostly because despite Borderlands being a game revolving around black comedy, the story was playing itself a little too seriously at points, and some of the jokes just weren't sticking for me. It lasted up until we finally got down to Pandora with our first hero, Reese, who was then trying to pull one over on his jackass boss back at Hyperion. My interest only ramped up as the story went on. Reese was a character who was completely out of his element on a hellhole of a planet like Pandora, and given that we've only ever experienced this setting from the eyes of unstoppable badasses who are right at home in this sort of chaos, it was neat seeing the setting from another perspective. Funny, too.
August.
What? Come on, man! Please!
I actually went over my hour limit on playing this game because the perspective swapped to the other protagonist, Fiona, and things were getting pretty juicy before I finally forced myself to quit. So yeah, I think I'll keep playing this. After all, I'm also not really picking up Borderlands 3 until it goes to Steam, so this will be a nice way to tide me over. Valkyria Chronicles was a game that I also picked up in a Steam sale years back, and one that I enjoyed a hell of a lot. It was a strategy RPG set in a fictional war between fictional countries in a fictional continent. It had a likable, memorable cast, memorable and challenging maps, and was just kind of a joy to play if I'm honest. I look back on it fondly. It's also a game that's been a little weird in how it handled every game that came after it. The original was a typical war is hell underdog story where you played as a militia made up of scrappy non-soldiers with lots of heart, and then the sequel was set after the war and followed students at a military academy, but I guess nobody liked that because then the third game took us back to the first war, albeit from a different perspective with a squad of disgraced soldiers. Also, both of these two were on the PSP, whereas the first game was on the PS3 originally. Also, 3 never came to the US for some reason. And then we got some weird fantasy spin-off that was incredibly lackluster, and when people didn't like that, we were right back to the setting of the first game again, but once again from a different squad's perspective. So yeah, I guess the series did one thing right once, and just can't get away from it now. So, with all that being said, Valkyria Chronicles 4 is a return to form with Valkyria Chronicles 1, or at least I would say that if I had played 2 and 3, but I didn't. But I did play Revolution, and yeah, it kinda stunk. Valkyria Chronicles 4 feels more like an expansion to the original game rather than a sequel as a result, and it could be that I'm just not far enough into the story yet, but it doesn't really feel like they tried to spend any time building up the characters or the setting, unlike the original game. It's pretty much treated like you should know everything that's happening already. They give you a quick blurb at the beginning to kinda get you up to speed if you don't, but it's much less substantial than the original game did. Gameplay-wise, Valkyria Chronicles 4 feels identical to the original with a couple of balance adjustments and a couple of new types of units. It's not a bad thing, since I love the original, but we'll see how it pans out and see if it ends up being a problem. I don't predict it will be. I've been looking forward to playing this game for a while now. I love the original, and if this one wants us to be more of the same with a few improvements and a few new things added on, with a different cast and different battlefront, that's just fine by me. So, there you have it, the games I'm gonna get around to playing next year and those that I'm not touching ever again. I gotta say, I'm not terribly surprised that so many of these lean towards me wanting to play them again versus the ones that I don't. I'm not the type of person to buy a game unless I think I'll actually enjoy it. It's not too fun for me to buy games that I think will intentionally drive me crazy. Anyway, looking back at my channel for this year, I realized my content was pretty sparse. I got really busy with work, got really busy with life, got really busy trying to start being a voice actor. It's just been a busy year. But regardless, I am thankful for everyone that continues to watch this content, even though my upload schedule is pretty whack. It's something I want to work on resolving next year if possible, so I want to try to stream more and try to do more videos, whether they be longer or short form, I don't know just yet. But I will say I've kind of been enjoying doing shorter videos a little bit, so there might be more of that. Is it possible for me to improve at all? Well, hell if I know, but we'll give it a shot. Anyway, I just want to say again, thanks you guys so much for watching. I hope the rest of the year treats you well, and I hope that 2020 doesn't kill us all. See you next time.